Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. I'm glad to have you with us again. As always, glad to have you every Friday morning from anywhere in the country that you're watching. And today we have a very special show because I have Roy Ponder as my guest today. And Roy is a very unique individual who has just an absolute love and penchant for weather. He's had it almost all of his life. And Roy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And I reached out to you actually because of a situation we had less than a week ago. Last Sunday, right from here in northern Texas, there was a storm that just came like out of nowhere. And when that happens, those of us locally know to go to POW Ponder on weather, and you'll see some of the information. And I want to tell everyone who is outside of our North Texas area that what you're going to hear today is relevant all over the country, because Roy has the ability to find weather systems wherever they are and to report on them. So you get that more accurate information. And I started following Roy because as in most metropolitan areas, when they say there is a 20% chance of rain, that could be anywhere in a metroplex area. It could be near the airport, or it could be out in the boonies someplace, and you don't know. Sun is shining in your house and it's pouring rain somewhere else. So having someone like Roy who knows how to get right to the nitty-gritty of a local storm is actually a godsend for those of us in the Collin County area and northern Texas area. But you're going to learn a lot of very interesting things. And I want to start, Roy, by you telling the audience, those that are watching via Facebook or YouTube, as well as those that are listening anywhere in the country, how did you get involved in really tracking and following weather patterns?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Houston. And in fact, we just had the anniversary of Hurricane Alicia back in August 18th, 1983. I was 8 years old at the time. And I just remember just being in awe. That storm actually became a Category 3 major hurricane that went directly over my house.
Wow.
It hit in the middle of the night. The windows were pounding. I found myself just looking out the window in awe of the power of nature, right? And then the winds got calm. I was like, what's going on? I went outside.
Eye of the storm.
At the time, being 8 years old, I was like, this is neat. I'm like, is it over? Like, what's going on? And by then, it was almost 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, right? But so it was the only time in my life, and I didn't know how privileged I was at the time to be at the eye of the storm. And then, of course, the back half hit, and I ran back inside, and we were out of power for 3 weeks later. It was crazy. And right after that, I found myself literally watching the weather a lot. You know, I watched all 4 news stations just to catch the weather because I wanted different viewpoints on the weather. And, you know, I was just really fascinated as a kid. But it was something I technically never went to school for. I started working out a lot at 14 and became a competitive bodybuilder as a teenager. I competed in 7 shows from basically 16 years old to 21. And I guess my claim to fame is I was the 1994 Southern States Championship, Teenage Championship at the time, which was the 10th largest show in the country.
Oh.
So I was pretty busy. I mean, they like put me on Muscle Mag and all that stuff, and so I was full blown. You know, I get pretty committed in whatever I get myself into. So you know, bodybuilding is a 24/7 sport. So But then I moved to Dallas, and then I started running a lot. Then I got into another, I guess, would you say, obsession with running. I went to an informational meeting. We started raising money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. I started running marathons through teaming training back in '09. And I ended up doing like 40 marathons. I've done ultra runs. I've done every race from a 5K to a 100-mile race. I've done that back-to-back marathons, 10K, 15K, back-to-back marathons, a 50K, which is a 31 miler,
Right.
and then 100K, which is a 62 miler, because I got into trail running, and then a 100-mile race. So, but as I was running, I would be in running groups, and I was like, hey, we need to finish before 2 o'clock because it's going to start raining. And then it started raining at 2 o'clock, and it's like, well, Roy, how'd you do that? I'm like, well, I follow the weather a lot. So it really wasn't until on my birthday of 2017, my wife was actually the culprit of it, created my POW Ponder on weather on Facebook. She was
just
like,
3 years ago?
It was 3 years ago. Yes.
Wow.
She's like, you talk to me about the weather all the time. Why don't you just create your own page and talk about the weather? And I was like, well, great. Well, how do I name it? What's the name going to be? So I asked on my personal page, what's the name? And my friends actually named it for me. And they came up with the name, since my name is Roy Ponder. They called POW. How about POW, Ponder on Weather? I'm like, that's brilliant. I'll go with it. And then I just started posting about what I know about the weather on Facebook and sharing it with the public. And I guess back then, because that was in April, and then August, we all remember Hurricane Harvey hit, right? Right. And at the time, I probably maybe had 100 followers. And I talked about Harvey, the first hurricane to first major hurricane to hit the U.S. Make landfall in 4,322 days. I was like, at the time, it was the first one to hit in 10 years. And I was talking about it, 10 days prior. So they're like, well, gosh, how did you do that? I'm like, no, I follow the weather a lot.
It's interesting. And I want to ask you this. I had mentioned to you, when you're tracking a hurricane, they basically track it from the time it leaves the west coast of Africa all across the ocean. And having come from South Florida, they'll tell you where it is 5 days out and 4 days out and 3 days, and the model and the cone is shifting and all. But here in Texas, we are more concerned basically with tornadoes. Mm-hmm. And tornadoes don't give you 4 or 5 days advance notice. How does someone, a layperson like myself, is there a clue that if you're outside and the winds pick up or whatever, is there a clue that you might want to keep your eyes open because this is a little abnormal and it could develop into something and develop quickly?
That's a great question. I mean, a lot of it is, there's a lot of different variables to weather. I mean, but first of all, you go back and using analogs. I mean, with that, DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, has stats going back from September 1st all the way to 1898. So essentially 122-year history. And the theory behind it is they all have analogs. And essentially, if it happened before, it potentially could happen again if the dynamics are right of how that played out in the past. But to answer your question about the tornadoes, there's basically 2 seasons in North Texas. There's spring, which is the most volatile time frame. That's when we get the most tornadoes. And then you have a second season, which is actually coming up September, October in the fall. And but if the dynamics are right, severe weather can strike 12 months out of the year. All you really need is the clash in temperatures. A lot of it has to do with the clash in temperatures. As we saw Sunday, with it being 104 degrees, which was the hottest day of the year. Right. And then we had that system come down from Oklahoma, which created an outflow boundary that was able to push out like what they call a gust front out ahead of it, created those high winds, and the atmosphere turned over on itself, causing the air to rise, which caused the severe weather and quickly. And then it was able to feed off itself because that outflow boundary was holding together, going all the way through the Metroplex.
And I mean, you went on the air right away, and you also we're just looking at you in front of a door, but you're sitting in front of a lot of equipment that you have in order to track the weather systems. And for instance, on Sunday, what I found very fascinating was your ability to say, all right, let's look at this from the wind point of view. Let's look at it from there is hail, and the hail is from this size in this location to this size in this location. We have wind gusts over here and the amount of rainfall. And I mean, you just were able to go back and forth from screen to screen and actually telling people, if you are living in this city or this town, the rain is probably 2 minutes away. And when you said it was heading to Frisco, by gosh, I looked out the window and there it was, and it started to come down. So that is the advantage that we as consumers have, to have people like you around, is because if something is coming, we need as much advance notice as we can to prepare for it. And again, if you tune into just a DFW network station, especially, for instance, in our case, when this storm was up here in northeast Texas, but you're watching a Fort Worth TV station. There may have been nothing in Fort Worth at all, because everything was happening around us. Well, those of us here don't know that. To be able to have that localized ability to track the weather is tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what's coming up this weekend is a fairly unique event, as we have actually two tropical systems are potentially going to be in the Gulf at the exact same time, going into peak season, hurricane season, which is September 10th. And one of those systems, which is TD14, it will pass through the Yucatan, almost identical to a track that Harvey took.
Right.
But it looks like it's going to be taking a little bit further northerly track. But once it gets in the Gulf, kind of all bets are off. I mean, we're going into the peak time of the season, essentially from August 15th to October 15th. 62% of the season happens during that time frame. So climatologically, it's very favorable. Warm waters. You got the whole Gulf to work with. And then another mechanism called the MJO is in a favorable phase of phase 8 N1 that's going to be close for N-close development or potentially intensification as it moves, as it gets closer. And we saw that with Hannah, but that's a potential that could happen with actually both of these storms, because the other storm, which just got named Laura, is potentially going to scrape the Lesser Antilles and then go north of Cuba. But then if it gets into the Gulf, the fear of that is it could go over what they call a loop eddy in the Gulf of Mexico. And we saw that with Michael back in 2018, where it rapidly intensified as soon as that hit that extremely warm waters, which is like 90 degrees in that area, could potentially rapidly increase that one. So these are going to be major events coming up early next week, potentially Tuesday and Wednesday, landfall and hurricanes at the exact same time. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, that's a rare occurrence for there to be two storms in the Gulf of Mexico at the same time.
It is very rare. I tried to go back and look at the data, and we can I put a description on my Facebook page earlier. I did see back in 1933, which was the second most active year in hurricanes or systems. They had 20 of them that year. On September 4th, 1933, there were two storms. There was a hurricane that hit South Texas, and there was another hurricane that hit Florida, but it hit on the eastern side. So it actually never made it into the Gulf of Mexico. So technically we had two named storms, but yes, very rare. There's questionable. It happened in 1959, but yes, it was definitely a very rare event for sure.
You mentioned earlier that you've got over 120 years worth of data collected and all in order to form these analogs. is this similar to like a farmer's almanac, where you can look at this data perhaps in January and say this is going to be a more or less than active year, so many storms, it looks like the El Nino factors and everything are greater this year, so you can kind of pre-predict where the weather patterns are going to be for the year?
You can, to a point. It definitely gets a little bit more difficult as you go further out. Like I know for the winter, historically we're going into what they call a weak La Nina phase, which essentially that's why we're having some elevated hurricane season, because there's less shear in the Atlantic, which potentially creates more storms. But it's basically a drier pattern coming in. So historically, winter is 90 days, right? And La Nina favors above average temperatures, below average precipitation for those 90 days, right? But that's the average of those 90 days. So within those 90 days, you still can get Arctic cold fronts that come down, and then obviously if you have the precipitation time with the cold air, then potentially it could snow. I mean, like I said, last time we had a little weak La Nina, it technically snowed 3 times in Houston in 2017, 2018. But overall for the winter, it was above average winter for as far as temperatures goes. But it's not to imply that it can't snow.
Now, if you and your wife decide you're going to go on a little vacation, do you look at the weather first?
Oh yes, absolutely. I kind of have a general idea of what's going to happen 2 weeks out for sure. I definitely. It's tough to, like, if you're booking a cruise or going on a vacation 3 months from now, you can't. You're not that good, right? But yeah. So there's a lot of variables to the weather. There's 112 different daily weather models on a daily basis to track the weather and to potentially predict the weather. 112. So your job is to formulate, how many of those do I look at? Which one's right? Is it right? Just because it's a weather model doesn't mean it's actually verbatim, it's correct. So you have to decipher all that data based on history. I grew up in Houston. I live in Dallas. I've been in Texas all my life, 45 years, all my life. So I kind of know the history. Hey, this event that happened on Sunday, this event that happened back in 2017, look at the atmosphere, look what's coming, what potentially could happen, because that actually happened back in 5 years ago, So I go through stuff like that and how to predict the weather,
So now you said you set up your Facebook page about 3 years ago, and all for people to follow, and all for people that now say, oh, gee, this sounds really interesting, and want to follow Roy Ponder. Mark just put up the Facebook page. What is the kind of information that will be available on a regular basis for people to see via the Facebook page? And do they have the opportunity to just send questions to you via the Facebook page and say, I want to know more about this?
Oh, absolutely. The Facebook page is POW Ponder on Weather. And if you can go to it, you can like it. And then if you go to the follow button and hit see first, you have the option to, every time that I post, you'll get a notification knowing that I post. And Facebook actually allows you up to 30 of those different ones that you potentially want to follow. But on a daily basis, I give a breakdown on, short-term forecast, long-range forecast, potentially other events if they keep scrolling down the page. Just talk about what's happening. Of course, the big event right now is those two systems and the Gulf. There's 2 hurricanes in the Gulf, but daily weather, temperatures. Here's that description showing the difference between 1933 and now. So yeah, all different types of, and like I said, I'm on it. I know when the weather models update. I know when the national weather, the hurricane center updates. Typically, when something's new, I'm gonna post about it. I talked about the derecho event on there that happened in Iowa. That was a big event back on August the 10th. that a derecho is basically a long area of straight line winds. And that was historic. So at the time, it was actually, now that they're doing research, it was actually bigger than they thought. They actually guesstimated winds, confirmed winds from the National Hurricane Center yesterday for a weather service in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, of 140 miles an hour from these straight line winds. And that derecho ended up being 650 miles long. That was a historic event. It is probably the biggest derecho in history of that strong of winds.
That's about a Category 3
hurricane. 4. And Category, that's right there, right on the edge of Category 4.
So where is the wettest part of the contiguous 48 states? Everybody says it's northwest Seattle, in that area gets more rain than anywhere else in the country.
Wettest in the United States, so that's a tough question. I don't, the southeast is beginning. We get 36.13 inches, and that average has gone up over the last 10 years. It used to be 32 about 10 years ago, but we average 36.13 inches here in North Texas.
Now, is that equally spread out over the year, or again, there's certain times like late spring and early summer and all where we get the bulk of it?
Here in North Texas, May is your wettest month. We average 4.90 inches of rain. May is the wettest month, and then October is the second wettest month.
Okay.
With spring and fall. Your driest month is August right now, and actually January. So you can see they're on opposite sides. So in August we average 1.91. So, and it's pretty close to that in January. But over the 12 month history, we average about 36.13. Which right now we're at 32.75. We only have about 4 more inches to go to be basically average for the year.
And you said with October being the second wettest time of the year, that it's more than likely that we will hit that average absolutely. Or go above it.
I mean, even going into a weak La Nina, I definitely see us being above average for the year for sure.
All right, now I'm going to throw another little bit of advice that you can give to our listeners and watchers. When there is a storm, and I've seen it in my own neighborhood, when there is a storm, very often, if you know that there's going to be some high winds, what people forget to do is to do something with their patio furniture and things like that, because they don't realize that lightweight furniture becomes a missile in high winds. So are there, basic precautions that you would tell people that when there is a storm coming to take advantage of for their own safety?
And I do that. I talk about secure and loose objects, like you mentioned, pillows, or anything that might be loose in your backyard. Might want to secure that. If the winds are expected to turn severe, which is basically 58 miles an hour or greater, then definitely you want to take down like the umbrellas in your backyard, secure the trampolines in your backyard, stuff like that. Could be flying projectiles. And then those flags, that a lot of people have flags hanging out in front of the house, to take those down. Like I said, everything becomes a projectile during high winds, and you don't realize that. But and obviously, if there's hail, then secure your car and the garage or a carport. And I definitely tell people, I can't tell you how many times someone's messaged me. It's like, you really saved my car, because I had no idea the hail was coming. I was able to get it in the garage, and then all of a sudden we had golf ball size hail at my house, and it would have been in the shop for 4 weeks and rent a car. And it's just, I know you have insurance, but it's just a pain to go through that.
And it fascinates me that a lot of people like to use their garage for their workout equipment or for a ping pong table, and their $40,000 cars are sitting on the driveway, and you get a hailstorm, and all of a sudden that $40 or $50 ping pong table doesn't mean squat in protecting your vehicle. Now, a tip that I've learned is, if there is a public garage somewhere near a municipal building or so, get your car over to the parking garage and get it safe. Then get your other car and go back home and put that in the garage.
Yeah, I've literally had people wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and take their car, move it in the garage, and come back and get it when the sun rises.
Yeah. And I had mentioned to you also when we were talking about the furniture in the backyard, that storm that came through on Sunday. Monday is garbage pickup day here in Frisco. So
Right.
everybody had their garbage cans out on the street or at the end of their driveways. And lo and behold, by Monday morning, there was garbage and garbage cans everywhere. So, you can't be too cautious and take precautions. But what's the key? The key is to know who Roy Ponder is and to tune in. And if he says, folks, I would start securing anything that's loose outside your house, then do it.
Absolutely.
What have you seen in your years of following the weather? And you said that you've been predicting it on your site for just the last 3 years. What are some of the situations that you've seen us get into weather-wise and all that we maybe are not prepared for or should be more prepared for?
Well, a historic event happened last year when we had 10 tornadoes over North Texas on October 20th, 2019. And that was an historic event. I mean, again, it's predicted, but you can't predict that extreme to unfold ahead of time. But on real time, talking about it, I was live on the air. I was live on the air for probably 5-6 hours that night talking about it. And I was seeing stuff like debris balls were flying 30,000 feet up in the air. I knew that was very extreme, but I was able to, one of the girls, I saw her at an event probably months after the fact. That's like, oh my gosh, I just wanted to let you know that during that storm, you said that tornado was going to be over 75 in Forest Lane around whatever time. I was able to call my parents. They looked out the window and they were watching TV. He looked out the window, and at that time, the husband saw a transformer blow. Right, and they're like, "Honey, we need to get in the back, the bathroom right now." So they literally went into the bathroom. Within a minute, the roof came off the house. So you don't realize that you saved my parents' life, and it just gave me chills. The impact that you can have of what you're doing, and you don't know it at the time, but you are making an impact out there, and we're talking about real life situations that can greatly impact for you for a long period of time. And they're still trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And a lot of those neighborhoods in Dallas devastated from those storms back in October.
Yeah, they were, and it was something that passed through. I think it was through in about 2.5 minutes, and here almost 2 years later, or at least a full year later, they're still trying to pick up some of the debris, and I know people personally that are still trying to get the puzzle solved in order to rebuild their houses. So it's something that can happen so quickly, and it takes a long time for it to rectify itself. Which that's the other hat that you wear, being in the insurance industry. Are there, because we are susceptible to tornadoes here, are there specific policies that people can have for extra protection from tornadoes?
Well, a lot of the policies in North Texas, they do cover wind and hail, and that would fall under the wind and hail category.
Or like an umbrella policy.
Yeah, the umbrella would fall under overseeing the home and auto insurance, overseeing to get you extra that liability protection. But there's still carriers out there that can get a 1% deductible, which is the lowest you can have in Texas. So we do get a lot of hail. I mean, we get a lot of movement. We get a lot of people coming from California moving to Texas. We got a lot of people moving to Texas. I think 12,000 a day. It's a lot. So they don't really understand, insurance and weather, and you have different weather, over there in California, it's earthquakes and everything else. But here it's like, we do get a lot of hail, and you just need to protect yourself for that. And
well, it's interesting. You mentioned something earlier, having moved from South Florida, where most of the homes down there were built on coral rock and so solid foundations. We moved here to Texas, and we're just not aware of the elements here, and realized that the weather can affect the soil here. And it literally can wash the soil from underneath a home and cause a foundation to crack or sink.
And that's what happens here too, because you have endorsements on insurance policies called water damage foundation, and that's prevalent for movement. You have shifting, you have dry times and you have wet times, and you got a lot of shift in the slab, and so then you have slab leaks in the driveways, and that's what that endorsement covers as well. So these are things that's not on other policies in other states because you don't really have those issues. So yeah, there are things that you need to be made aware of in Texas to protect you on all sides. Because my slogan for POW is protecting you before and after the storm, and that I live and breathe by it. I've saved a lot of people a lot of money just being protected ahead of time, and to create like not even claims in general. So the whole idea is you don't want to file a claim. That's the last thing you want to do. If I can protect you from filing a claim and having your rate go up for the next 5 years, I've saved that person thousands of dollars just by giving them the ample knowledge. Maybe, hey, we'll do this, do that, and you won't have to go through that headache.
Well, and having the knowledge of what the weather can do in this area is helpful for those policyholders that have no clue what to do. And maybe add a little bit of coverage, liability for wind and hail as opposed to rain, because we don't really get that much rain. It's just that we can go through a very, very heavy dry spell, and then when it rains, the rain doesn't soak into the ground; it runs across the ground and washes things away.
Yeah, it's been fairly wet. The last 4 to 5 years has been above average rainfall, so it has been very wet. Technically, the last 10 years, our dry year was 2011, but that's been a while. It's been almost 10 years now.
Yeah. All right, you're a family man.
Absolutely.
As your wife, and you have 2 sons?
I have 2 boys. They're 12 and will be 15 next week. And then my wife, we call her Mama Pow for Pal.
Mama Pow.
And then, and then my kids are Little Pal, and then of course I have a Jack Russell called Puppy Pal.
he's the Pow Wow.
Yes, exactly.
All right, what's the interest level from your wife and your sons in following these weather patterns like you do?
I think she's used to it now. We've been married 16 years, and she knew I loved the weather, and it's just it creates an outlet for me. I get a lot of fulfillment talking about it, forecasting the weather, and really just helping people out. I'm a giver in nature, so if I can share my passion with others and just help one person, then I've benefited. And that's the main reason why I really do it. The ultimate drive behind it. Because ultimately it is a hobby. At the end of the day, it is a hobby of mine, but I do create a living through insurance. But it brings me a lot of joy to be able to share all my knowledge with others, and it really impacts them in a real way, and they benefit from it. And that's what keeps me going.
Well, it's a highly educated hobby. That's for sure. I think the skill level is not so much in recognizing and analyzing the weather. It's in the prediction, being able to know what potentially could happen and then follow it before it happens. Do your sons ever get caught, by friends at school? So what happened with your dad last night? Was he this and that?
It is funny. The more times I post and go live, I'm definitely getting more well known in the community. A lot of places I went to get milk the other night at Kroger. I was just literally going to get milk, and it took me an hour. It's like, well, where'd you go? I was like, well, I actually ran into 4 people that recognized me, and we just talked. I talk a lot, you know. And it's like, gosh, it took you an hour to go get milk. I'm like,
yeah. Oh, Mr. Ponder, my wife and I want to go on a vacation and everything. Should we go to the Caribbean or should we go to the mountains?
No, but I have fun with it. You know, I know when the weather gets bad, people rely on me now. I mean, you know, it's great, but it's also kind of scary in a way. You know, I've got 23,000 followers following me now, and they rely on every word I say, and I'm really conscious about the wording that I use too. I mean, it's a delicate balance of predicting the weather, because there's no magic formula. You know, I can be wrong, and I have been wrong. You know, so it's definitely challenging, but I love the challenge, and that's what keeps me going. And the more I do it, I'm able to craft my skill and get better. And that's the ultimate goal that I'd like to do, and just get better, because there's no one's going to ever be perfect, right? But if I could just get 1%
that's why it's called
better,
predicting the weather. That's why they call it weather forecast and predictions. You know,
right?
So, something like why they call
Texas. I mean, this is probably the most extreme volatile. It's one of the most difficult places to forecast in the United States, besides maybe Denver, where you just get a lot of patterns where you have transitions, you know, where the jet stream dips and it lifts, and you know, where the tornado alleys, I would say, lowering, getting further south throughout the years. I see that happening. So, or then you have the cap. You know, a lot of it happens in North Texas. I mean, is the cap going to bust? Is there a cap? You know, basically, there's a lot of times it's like, oh my God, things look really bad, but the cap held. And luckily it held, because we could have had tennis ball size hail. But other times where it doesn't really look that bad, but then it just ramped up so quick, the cap busted, and boom, and then it just fed off each other, and then it's worse than what was predicted. So
I'm also curious, have you seen an increase over the years of severe lightning in our weather systems that have come through?
I have seen the ocean temperatures enhance, and that's one of the things, that you have increased water vapor, you have increased dew points, so you have a lot more moisture flow off the Gulf, and that's what you need for severe weather. At least that's one element of it. And then with the jet stream dipping further south than what it normally would, say maybe 10 years ago, you have that dynamic too. So I do see us having maybe a little bit more extreme type weather because of that. Just because you have the ocean temperatures are a little bit higher than what they were, well, gosh, back in the 70s or even the 80s. So the weather patterns are changing, and it gets more challenging on a yearly basis because of those factors. And I just think there's a lot more extremes in weather that'll be coming in the future, unfortunately.
It is the equipment that you use, and as I say, for instance, I use last Sunday as a prime example. You know, you were constantly going on your screens back and forth between showing where the severe lightning was, the heaviest rainfalls. You could show specifically the hail patterns in the area. Have you seen that the forecasting equipment that is available to you and to other meteorologists has improved rapidly over the last so many years?
Oh, absolutely. It's greatly improved in the last 5 years. Greatly. And to the point now where, you know, we're at 12 storms. The satellite is enhanced. I mean, some of those storms were probably questionable even to be named because they were way out in the Atlantic. We wouldn't be able to see those 10 years ago. We just wouldn't have the satellite to name it. You know, I got named for 24 hours and then it went out to sea. You know, so a lot of that is mixed in because, yes, we are having 12 storms, which is the most on record. But some of those storms, you know, we wouldn't have been able to see, you know, 10, 20 years ago.
Now, for the folks that are listening and watching, If somebody said, that's really fascinating to me, and I'd like to maybe set up my own little studio and track the weather and all. Ballpark figure, is it an affordable hobby for somebody that wants to get in it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I probably have 5 different weather sites that I pay for. I mean, even though, yes, I mean, it's a free service that I do actually offer on Facebook, but I pay probably ultimately about $100 a month just with all the different websites and apps that I have to bring you the weather, to track the weather for you. I that's why I was like, hey, well, I do have a couple things. I have my own rain gauge. I have a POW Ponder on rain gauge.
I was just going to mention that. Yeah. And people can go to your website and everything, and if they want, they can order one. And it's fascinating to have it just sitting in your yard, to know that when they say, well, 20 miles down the road, they got 2 inches of rain, and you look in yours and you got 4 inches of rain in your gauge.
Absolutely. I mean, the rainfall can vary greatly, just even a couple miles away. And so that's always fascinating. I think it's really neat that people, are posting their different rain gauges, their different, and not just now that I have it's actually on Amazon now. So you can go to Amazon and find the POW Ponder on weather rain gauge, and people are ordering from New York, and Iowa. I'm getting orders from all over the country. And I just think it's really,
it works anywhere.
Right, actually, it works anywhere. So, and that's why I have that. So I did want to have something that's available, and it's free shipping too. So I mean, you can't get any easier than that. And it's Amazon, so it's there like in the next day or two.
Yes, especially if you hear there's a storm coming, you may want to order one right away, so that you know.
Right.
What, and something I want to follow up on that I said earlier, again, to those that are watching, because I don't want my audience to say, oh, well, that's a great show and he's a great guy, but that's just North Texas. Anywhere in the country, anybody that's watching this show or listening to this show, if you have questions, Roy will be more than happy to answer those questions. Reach him through his Facebook page or his website. And also these 2 storms, for instance, that are in the Gulf of Mexico right now, and one of them, which will be named Marco once it reaches that storm status, and all, that's the one that may be heading to the Houston area.
Absolutely.
Well, once a storm hits the mainland of the country, it continues to move. So it's important for you, where if you are in Kansas and that storm comes through Houston and you want to know, is that heading up towards Kansas or Missouri and all, go to Roy's website and all, because you can watch it, you can track it, you can ask questions about, do you predict that it's heading my way?
Absolutely.
And, I think it's a commercial for you. It's an endorsement for you, but you have such a passion for this that I don't think that there is any stupid question that anybody could ask about weather that you would not be willing to address.
We all want to learn, and there's definitely no stupid question for sure. Yeah.
And learning can help in safety also, because the more questions you ask, the safer that you can be should any of these storms hit or you encounter any of them.
Most definitely.
So let me throw a curveball at you. What do you see over the next, the pattern over the next, say, 3 to 5 years of where overall weather is going? We're talking about climate change and all. Are we, for instance, here in Texas or the East or West Coast, are we all headed for hotter summers and colder winters?
It's challenging to predict that far ahead, but yes, I would, in general, definitely just a lot more extreme weather. That could imply, droughts, floods, hot times, cold times, the ocean temperatures are warming, the patterns are a lot more active. Like I said, Phoenix, even though it was rainy here, but Phoenix has gone through their hottest summer on record ever. I mean, it's blown past any records even close. They've had almost 45 days now over 110 degrees. They've had 25 plus days of 90 degree, or, low temperatures. The low was like 95 degrees the other night. I mean, yes, it is the desert. Death Valley hit 130. That was the last time. The last time it happened was 1913. So you're seeing that, and then like I said, you're seeing all the stuff with the hurricanes. You're seeing the floods, and we've had Harvey, and just in general, I think the patterns are just a lot more active and a lot more extreme in general.
And do you see this while you analyze this 120 some years worth of weather patterns? Are there things that you say, yeah, it looks like it is heading in that direction because the analog shows that this is the direction it's heading?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely helps out a lot. But like I said, the difference is
the variables.
The water temperatures. I mean, the water temperatures are a good 1 or 2 degrees, and I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot, because it's an average over the whole, globe. It's an average. So, and that's basically, I mean, the globe is 70% water. There's only 30% land, so that's where all the energy comes from, is the oceans.
I don't think that the average person realizes that so much develops from the water around the globe.
And that's particularly, I mean, the La Nina is basically implying you have, in the Eastern Pacific, the water's cool. So as the jet stream comes across, cool waters don't pick up storms. I mean, it doesn't amplify. You need to have heat. So you're less susceptible of picking up precipitation and dropping over the United States versus El Nino pattern, which is elevated temperatures, hotter temperatures. So more susceptible, picking up abundance of amount of moisture, higher water content value, and dropping it over the United States. So that's how you predict it. All of our weather comes from the Bering Strait and the Eastern Pacific. A lot of the systems come from Alaska.
And it's interesting that in the Atlantic it's called a hurricane, and in Asia it's called a typhoon, and they are very similar systems. But you can track all of them. In your information, in fact, on your website and all, I was fascinated by a quote from John Ruskin that you have listed, and it said, "There's no such thing as bad weather, only different kinds of good weather." and we look at storms, snowstorms and windstorms and rainstorms and all as bad weather, but it's just different ways that you're analyzing the good weather. There's the quote on the screen, folks.
Right.
So I wasn't making it up. It's a truism.
I always like to look at the positive side of everything. And so there's a positive that comes out of everything. And so, yes, like you said, even though they're technically bad weather, I was like, hey, there's a bright side to it,
And there's the information on the screen right now. Go to POW Ponder on Weather on Facebook. And you can become a follower too. I'm proud to be one of the 23,000 that are following you. Whether there's a weather system out there or not, it's just good to know that you can get the correct answers to your questions. And Roy, I can't thank you enough for taking the time this morning to be with me on the show and to share your expertise and your passion and your knowledge with our audience.
No problem.
And I wish you the very, very best. And folks, if there's a storm out there, wherever you're living, and all, go to the website, because you'll find out all kinds of interesting information about it, and field any questions you want. Let Roy know.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And the very best to you. And I hope when you're out running, you always have the wind at your back.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again, folks, for tuning in. I appreciate it very much. We'll see you again next week. And as I always say, be yourself, because everyone else is taken. See you next time.